Thanks, guys. Thank you. All right, changing plans, lock the door. Where no one's leaving here until we can all agree on what threat hunting is. I'm kidding. We don't have that much time. Or the appetite for violence. So thank you so much for coming out and listening to us talk today. So I'm John. Neil, sorry. Celebrity names. This is Grifter. I don't know if you guys heard of him. And Samir. And between us, we have decades of experience in threat hunting and incident response and security engineering and building technology. Been around the block a few times. And today, we want to talk a little bit about our new approach to building and maturing a threat hunting program. And I'm going to do that by starting with talking about a story about phishing. And I don't mean the phishing that you're probably going to hear about all week. I mean like really ripping lips, catch me a marlin phishing. So I have a buddy, Ryan. Ryan loves to fish. Actually, this logo appears from his blog, realfishing.net. Give him a follow. And I go fishing with Ryan quite a bit, actually. And not that I particularly love fishing. It's fun. You know what I do love? I love having drinks on a boat. So I make myself available. I've been to Ryan's house, and Ryan has a stupid amount of fishing gear. Like, it's all over his house. And I said, Ryan, do you really need this much stuff to catch a fish? And he responds with, depends on the fish, right? I kind of walked into that one. So he goes on and shows me all the different baits and lures and hooks that he has. And he says, each one of these things is designed to catch a particular type of fish. And each one of these things requires a particular technique. Then he gets real excited and he runs over to the wall and he shows me all these different rods. And he's like, see, all these rods, depending on where I'm fishing, I might need to use a different rod. So that was really interesting to me, because what I learned is that it is the environment and the fish that is driving Ryan's decision in tools and techniques, and not the other way around. And Ryan finally makes this comment that really stuck with me. He's like, and sometimes I don't use a rod at all, because sometimes I like to do spear fishing. And he said, it's kind of weird because some people don't consider that real fishing, but it doesn't matter to him as long as he's having fun. So what I learned from Ryan is that Ryan's goal was not to fish. Ryan's goal was to have fun. And fishing was just his way to achieve his goal. And fishing can take on many different shapes, forms, or functions and use drastically different tools or methodologies. I'm going to tie this together. Bear with me. So that reminded me about this one time I was doing a threat briefing for a bunch of different security teams. And I had mentioned in passing something about what threat hunting could do, not realizing that I had just hucked a Molotov cocktail into this conference call, and it broke out into what I can only describe as a war between multiple different factions on what is or isn't threat hunting. And people are getting like big feelings about this and arguing, right? And then suddenly it goes, like the whole call focuses on me, and they want to get my take. They're like, well, where do you stand? Because you got the hypothesis people here, you got the free-form searching people here, you have the people think that it's intelligence-driven here, and they're all closing in on me. So you guys ever see Jurassic World? Like, where he's keeping the raptors at bay, and they're all closing in. I'm just standing there, and I'm looking out. Sounded like a slightly more handsome Chris Pratt. Don't laugh at that. It's true. And suddenly I stand up and I said, you're all right. You see, because why can't we approach threat hunting like Ryan approaches fishing? Why can't we let the goals of the respective hunt teams drive what the definition of threat hunting is, and now it's an individual decision? And then we can stop arguing about what is or isn't threat hunting and focusing on the thing that really matters, which is, are they effective? And effectiveness, you can use their goals. So that was really interesting to me, and I got really, really curious about measuring effectiveness on threat hunting programs versus goals and objectives. So I started writing down like a rubric, if you will, of like characteristics of a threat hunting program that I, generally ones, and which ones that perhaps in this thing, which actually became the maturity model in the framework, if I look at these things, is there something in here that will allow me to predict whether or not a threat hunting program was going to be effective? So I'd had my thing, and I was like, I need to test this, right? I need to get out there, I need to talk to people much smarter than me, people that are just crushing it in the game, to find out what other threat hunting teams are doing and what works really well, to see if I can identify high performers and identify what characteristics are shared amongst that group. So I did. The people that know me the best are not shocked by this at all, because I am that golden retriever. I love making friends. So I spent 2 years, guys, 2 years talking to various threat hunting teams of all shapes and sizes about getting into their processes, their staffing, their, how they execute a hunt, how do they do hunt tempo, all these different things, and trying to identify, who the high performers were, like who were clearly crushing it based on, the rubric that I had and measuring their effectiveness. And I was able to do that. And here was what was very, very interesting to me. Because what the shared characteristics of the high performers wasn't the fancy tools, it wasn't the hunters with PhDs, it wasn't any of the technical capabilities really, because they varied so much. But what it was is all of the high performers, whether they knew it or not, had a well-defined long-term vision and mission, and a leader who was hyper-focused on making sure that all of the people, processes, and technologies were designed to keep that threat, to align with that long-term mission. So that was very interesting, because I didn't expect that, right? So now we're talking about why things like strategic management and how they impact threat hunting. Because I got to see what other frameworks would consider a lower maturity threat hunting program. They were using open source free tooling. But based on the threats that were applicable to them, they were highly effective. They brought a lot of value to the organization. So how can I say that they are lower than another hunt team that I got to see, where they had all the fancy whiz-bang tools? They had PhDs in the hunter program. They had this giant data lake. But they didn't take the time to institute those fundamental components of an effective program. So they ran into issues like political problems and getting access to data and doing interfacing with the SOC. And so they were never really able to find their full potential. It's important to note that it wasn't enough, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, it wasn't enough for a program to have a mission or strategy written down or even fantastic goals and objectives. It was all about execution. So in Atomic Habits, there's this great quote, and it says, "We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems." And that was held true even in this case. The other thing that was really, really interesting to me, and I want to talk specifically to the executives in the room, is when I was interviewing hunters, the more hunters within a program who could fully articulate what the program's long-term goals and vision were, the more likely they were belong to a high-performing group. So think about that. The more individual contributors that are marching in the same direction, that's when the magic happens. And I challenge you to make some magic of your own. Get involved with your threat hunting program, start a threat hunting program, and put your best leaders in charge of that, regardless of their technical capabilities. The best threat hunting program that I got to view over this time is run by a woman who essentially had no threat hunting experience at all before she took over the program. But you know what she is? She's a fantastic leader. She's great at building and managing a team, and she's absolutely world-class at building effective processes and procedures. It's really great when you get to see when it happens really well, all the great things that come out of threat hunting program. In that specific example, through her work, through her mission and her program, that organization is using threat hunting as the driver for their entire security strategy. So outputs from their threat hunting program are going into things like risk and compliance and governance. They're making decisions about data for what is valuable data versus invaluable data. So every bit of data that we centralize has a dollar amount associated with it, usually, in some way or fashion. So they're making decisions that are impacting things like budget, or identifying dependencies between systems, like critical business systems. So that feeds into operations. So they may change how they actually monitor the most important things within their organization, just for uptime, because I didn't realize that this application had a critical dependence on something 2 moves away. Is great. So there's a lot to this, and I've seen what happens, unfortunately, when the magic doesn't happen. I've lived that. I want to like, I've lived this life before, guys. I don't want to seem like I'm just like did research and I don't understand what it's like in the real world, but I have. So a couple years ago, I was asked to launch a threat hunting program for an organization. And can't mince words about this, I failed. I failed, and it sucked at the time. But I'm incredibly proud of my failures now. Like, failure to me is now I've been gifted with the opportunity to learn and grow. And from that example, I can look back and see why it was so easy for me to fail. Because if you go out there and you look at all the resources out there that are talking about threat hunting, it kind of flies in direct conflict with everything that we've found. The first thing that most threat hunting resources out there do within the first sentence is they define what threat hunting is to the reader. And we've already kind of established why that might not be the best idea. So when I had this project, I found a definition of threat hunting that I thought was really cool, and that's the one that I wanted to do, but I didn't consider whether or not that aligned with what the organization needed or wanted. I didn't think about how that would work with the other teams within the security. And so I set it up for fail just by making that critical misstep right out of the gate, because I was taking someone else's viewpoint and trying to apply it to an internal organization. The second thing is that most resources out there are hyper-focused on the technical execution of finding evil, which is great. I'm not saying that the technical pieces aren't important. They are. They're obviously. But what I am saying is that when the fundamental pieces are not implemented and executed, the technical pieces become extremely hard. Whereas if you do the work on the fundamental high-impact things for an effective threat hunting program, the technical pieces, that becomes easy. That's the easy part, because there's so much great work out there in that. That you can use. The people doing work in that space are doing absolutely great. It's just we need to focus on, you know, the cart before the horse kind of deal. Like, we really need to think about the building blocks before we start executing. Finally, the other thing that I noticed is, while it did seem like there was some resources out there that looked like they were well thought out and designed, they were usually tied to a particular vendor or technology or consulting service, which is, I mean, I get it. Like, we got to make money, but what kind of bothers me about that is if I lead with tech, so I make a technical decision because I go out there and I Google it, now I'm buying a solution to a problem I don't fully understand yet, and now I'm invested in this. Like, are we going to try to create an environment we got to pay to play in threat hunting? Like, that just didn't sit right with me. So I thought about what can I do? What can I do to help? Right. So Simon Sinek has this. He talks about this all the time. But he says, like, in the bookstore, there's a whole section dedicated on self-help, but there's no section on helping others. And we really need to help each other. So I thought, well, what can I do to help? How can I make sure that everyone learns from my mistakes so this doesn't happen again? So I started creating a new framework, one that was free and open, will be community-driven, vendor-agnostic, that we can try to make a real big impact and make some magic. So at this point, I'd like to bring up Samir, who's going to actually introduce the Open Threat Hunting Framework and talk about the modules and a little bit about his experience.
Thank you, John. So what John mentioned about development of the Open Threat Framework and having decades worth of experience doing the threat hunting, I was the new kid on the block he brought in here who can ask all the silly questions. Every time he put in some idea, why? Because I did not have that experience. I do OT security, I have done application development, so threat hunting specifically was a new thing for me to learn as well. While I was learning, I was asking all these questions. Why? Why? So that made it to pique my interest more and more while I was trying to relate all these elements of threat hunting framework that he had started putting together, tying back to the problems I had when I was leading an OT security program for a manufacturing organization. The classic problem that we have about which data do you have? I don't know. What do you need? And all these questions always had created some bottlenecks for me, getting the automated detection set up for the operational technology environment and made it more difficult to get buy-in from the operations. It's always the struggle. We all know that. So when we started working on this, there are several elements of these which were very particularly interesting and hit the nail on its head. I won't go through all of the modules that are over here, but we have already talked about some fundamental modules that are foundational for building the good threat hunting program. For example, the foundational piece, which is where you need to have a goal that works for your organization. But taking it to the next level, you need an organization. When we talk about the organization, it's not about just the organizational structure. It's about the skills that you need to place, and you need to have the right skills for the right type of threat hunts that you are going to have. You need networking expertise. You need endpoint expertise. So you need a right balance. And if a person is new to the threat hunting or somebody who wants to have a go in the threat hunting as a career choice, you need to be able to have some way or a guidance where you can find what skills I need to acquire. And this is exactly where structure hits at home run, because the skill matrix basically gives you this. There are a couple of things, a couple of modules, as I mentioned, were quite critical for me to understand and related to my experience. One of them was like preparation. We are in a data business when we talk about security, right? So we do data analysis all the time. We mentioned about data lakes. We talked about data analysis. But if you do not have data, good data, reliable data, your output is going to be crap. So garbage in, garbage out. You need to work on your data dictionary, data lakes, clean data lakes, reliable data lakes, to be able to drive good threat hunting program going forward. Lab environment, we have some scripts that we have launched with the threat hunting framework that will give you the lab to be hosted on-prem or in the cloud environment. So we hope that we can collectively improve that going forward. Important piece and heart of the framework is operational module. It's a big, complex problem to solve. We want to make sure we break it down in smaller, manageable chunks. What exactly it is identifying is, you identify a threat hunt, you don't go and start Googling what exactly you need to find and start threat hunting from a technical point of view. Identify what problem you're trying to solve, what threats are applicable to your environment, what threats are applicable to your organization. Retail and finance are not going to have the same threats applicable to you. So make sure you filter that choice down. Out of 1,000, make it focus on 15, 20 that you need to have. Get the TTPs out based on what you have from threats that you have identified. Make sure you prioritize them. Create your backlog. And I'm trying to get to the project management side of this a little bit. As we spoke highly about it, you have to be organized. You have to be able to schedule it properly. You have to assign your skills to the right people at the right time. You need to know about your organizational dependencies, interdependencies in terms of what you can do when, financial closures, be it from the control system point of view, the turnarounds, everything, right? So that's critically important. Once you do that, once you have those basics identified, you can schedule and have those technical hunts done. Measurement, communication, we have spoken about this. Basically, you need to be able to measure your success and communicate your success. Unless you do that, you do not have your organization believing you, funding you to continue your threat hunting going forward. Maturity is where we have tried to provide the matrix which will allow you to do the assessment of your own maturity level. And also, if you want to have a goal where you want to improve your maturity, how you get there, what do you need to add. Important piece, final note from me is continuous improvement. We have to do this, right? We have to improve our efficiency. And with that, I will make a point that we collectively, as a community, we need to improve our framework. So to take us through the next stages of improvement of the community as well as the framework going forward, Neil will take us through that.
Thanks. All right, so, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. This is just the beginning for this. When I started threat hunting, I got into it about 8 years ago. Going out and finding information that was available to say, here's how you get started, here's where you should go look, here's some hypotheses that you should go test out, was really difficult. As John mentioned earlier, when you do find things, they're often like 3 or 4 page PDFs that have, you know, some information in it, but it's specific to this is how you search for that thing within this product, right? And so that became incredibly frustrating, right? Where I was like, how am I supposed to get better at this if I can't find any information? And so as I continued to you know, hunt in different organizations. My role at the time was to go into some of the largest organizations in the world and hunt in their environments or assess their threat hunting programs. And I would go in and I would see different things over and over and over again. And I would be like, oh, that's really cool. More people should do that. But nobody had written it down and just put it on the internet. And so when I got to a point in my threat hunting journey, yeah, I sound like a hippie. When I got to the point in my threat hunting journey that I felt like I had enough information that I had collected from my experience hunting in all of these organizations around the world, I started to talk about here's the way that I think you should go about doing this. And not only that, but here's what I think you should do when you find these things. And the thing that I tried to drive home was write it down, right? Documentation matters. Metrics matter. They're not the sexiest part of this by far, right? But being able to share what you have can be incredibly valuable to other organizations. We often in this industry have I think most of us have a fairly deep level of imposter syndrome. Like we're like, at any moment I'm going to be found out. They're going to know that I don't belong on this stage. They're coming to get me right now, right? Like so, but the reality is that there's something that you know that could keep another organization from experiencing either a declared incident or a verified breach. And all you have to do is share that, whether that's in the form of a white paper or in the form of a conference talk, or you know, putting together this framework, right? When John approached me, he was like, hey, I started working on this thing. I'd like to pull a couple of you guys in. We're going to write all this stuff down about programmatically how do we move a threat hunting program forward, from how do you staff it? What are the job descriptions that you should list if you're looking to staff, you know, or even just hire a single threat hunter, right? What are the skills that that individual should have? And if you're looking within your SOC or CERT team, where are those folks that have the skills that can fit within the technologies, within the bounds of your organization, and where are you missing visibility? Without those things, you know, you become, again, incredibly frustrated. And so it's time to put our money where our mouth was and write stuff down. And so by the time we're done here, like, okay, when we're done, I'll go to the next slide and you'll see the link to the GitHub that has where the threat hunting framework and the information within it resides. Clearly we didn't just show you pictures of text on a screen because that's absurd. Oh wait, there's text on a screen. But Willy Wonka's there too. But it's roughly 100 pages of what is essentially advice that we have gleaned over the combined 20 years of threat hunting experience that we have together. And just saying, like, this is what worked for us. This is where we fell on our face. This is where you should go if you're trying to, you know, improve your program. And we need your help. Right? This should be and is community driven. It's not something that is a vendor putting out a 4-page PDF so they can sell some product down on the expo floor, probably immediately below us, right?
It's happening right now.
Yeah, it's happening now. People are out there saying, like, automate your threat hunts. Don't, right? Like, so, you know, like, find the technologies that help enable you to find more actionable data so that your hunts are more successful. What are those technologies? I don't know. Okay, well, let's write that down and share that with people. Tell us your successes. Share with us your successes so we can build this framework and make it larger and make it better for everybody, right? It should be and will be a continuous evolution, right? We're going to, this document will be a living, breathing thing. And as people say, like, yeah, but this worked for me better and that worked for me better, and oh, you're missing a couple skills on that skills skills matrix that you guys developed. Why don't you go and throw these things in there as well? It will just get better and better, and the next organization or person who comes behind and says, I don't know how to get a threat hunting program started, or I don't know how to show value to management so that I can hire the right people for it or put the right amount of hours behind it. So please help us, right? This is vendor agnostic. There is no particular vendor behind this. Again, it was one of the things that kind of like tweaked us the wrong way. So we said everything has some product tied to it. Why don't people just share advice without trying to shove something down your throat? That being said, if you have a technology that works for you and you're like, it works in this way or for these use cases, and I found that this particular platform over here is better, or I'm more successful at this than these other ones, let's get that in there as well. And then of course, just tell us what we're missing. We are like by no means the end-all be-all of threat hunting. We have a lot of experience. We've been in some of the largest organizations in the world, some of the most well-known organizations and governments, and looked and evaluated their programs. And we're just trying to share what we learned, but please share with us. We want to learn from you. And now we've hopefully at least given you a place to get started, where maybe previously you were like, well, yeah, I have some things to share, but I don't know where to put that. And I'm not going to like spin up some website or like write another white paper or do whatever. If you have 3 paragraphs that you think you can share, or 120 characters, like share that with us, right? So please, share your experiences, share what works for you, and share what doesn't work, because sometimes that's even more valuable. With that, that's where you can get it.
Hopefully. I think I saved it.
Did you?
I think I opened it. I think it's public, but if not, give me a minute.
5 minutes.
And I'll do it. But I'm pretty sure I did.
All right, wrap us.
So thank you guys so much. I mean, I really appreciate it. I hope this makes sense, and I hope that we can get everyone's help in to, make this better, because, the magic's in the humans, and so let's start working together.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.